The air in the high Yukon doesn't just turn cold, it turns sharp like a glass blade pressing against the skin. Shadow, a seasoned Siberian Husky with a coat the color of storm clouds, stood at the edge of the cedar break. His breath came in rhythmic, silver plumes, the only sound in the forest paralyzed by a sudden, early freeze. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had slipped his lead from a nearby trapping cabin days ago. Driven by a scent that didn't belong to the wind, he found him at the base of a hollowed spruce, a ball of soot-colored fur and a shivering sliver of silver. The bear cub, barely larger than a loaf of bread, was making a sound like a rusty hinge, a desperate, rhythmic clicking for a mother who lay motionless 50 yards away under a fallen timber. Beside him, a wolf pup, its ribs visible through patchy fur, huddled against the warmth of the cub. In the wild, these three were a triangle of death. The wolf would one day hunt the husky. The bear would one day crush the wolf. But here, under the oppressive weight of the silence, Shadow did something that defied the code of the North. He didn't bark. He didn't hunt. He stepped into the hollow, his paws crunching softly on the frozen pine needles, and lay down. He tucked his thick, plumed tail around the shivering pair. The warmth of his 101-degree body began to melt the frost on their fur. It was a silent pack sign in the snow. Chapter 2. The Season of Shadows. The next 6 months were a masterclass in impossible survival. Shadow became a ghost. To feed them, he didn't just scavenge. He taught them. He would pin a grounded ptarmigan not with his teeth, but with his weight, allowing the wolf pup, whom he called with low, guttural whine, to practice the snap of the jaw. The bear, clumsy and thick-pawed, learned to watch Shadow's eyes. The environment was a brutal teacher. The smell of the forest shifted from the damp, sweet rock autumn to the metallic, sterile scent of deep winter. Shadow's pads grew thick and calloused, cracking under the salt of the frozen lakes. He spent hours licking the ice on the wolf's paws, a grooming ritual that established a hierarchy of love rather than dominance. They moved as a single unit through the taiga. The bear, growing rapidly on a diet of raided squirrel caches and winter berries Shadow dug from the permafrost, began to mirror the husky's gait. It was a strange sight, a predator of the tundra walking with the nimble, light-footed grace of a sled dog. They slept in the pile, a tangle of limbs and fur where it was impossible to tell where the dog ended and the wolf began. The wolf pup, now lanky and yellow-eyed, would often rest his chin on Shadow's flank, his ears twitching at the slightest snap of a twig, already assuming the role of the family sentinel. Chapter 3. The Parting of Paths. Nature is a clock that eventually strikes the hour of truth. By the second spring, the bear was a 300-pound adolescent, a wall of muscle and curiosity. The wolf was a shadow in the brush, his howl beginning to find a haunting, multitonal frequency that signals to others of his kind. Shadow felt the shift. The show don't tell of the wild was becoming clear. The bear was spending longer hours at the river, mesmerized by the flash of silver trout, and the wolf would disappear for days, tracking the migration of the caribou. The emotional weight hung heavy in the humid spring air. Shadow would sit on a granite overlook, watching his sons. He knew he could no longer provide what their DNA demanded. One evening, under a moon the color of bruised plum, a pack of wild wolves sang from the northern ridge. It wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. The silver wolf looked at Shadow, his tail tucked low, his eyes swimming with a visible, agonizing conflict. Shadow stood, walked to the wolf, and gave him a firm, final nuzzle, a push toward the dark trees. It was a dismissal. The bear followed shortly after, lured by the scent of a female and the irresistible call of the high berries. Shadow watched them vanish into the green labyrinth of the forest. He stayed on that ridge for 3 days, his coat matted with burrs, his eyes fixed on the spot where the brush had last closed behind them. He was a father whose nest was suddenly, violently empty. Chapter 4. The White Death. 2 years passed. Shadow was older now, his muzzle stained white, his movement stiff with the onset of arthritis. He had returned to the life of a wanderer, staying near the fringes of human settlements, but never truly rejoining them. Then, the great storm of 26 hit. It was a polar vortex, a weather event where the temperature drops so fast the sap in the trees freezes and explodes like ore gunshots. Shadow was caught in a mountain pass, the wind howling at 80 miles per hour, stripping the heat from his body. The snow wasn't falling. It was a horizontal wall of white glass. He tried to dig a snow cave, but the ground was iron hard. His heart, once the engine of a champion, began to flutter. Hypothermia is a peaceful thief. It makes you feel warm just before it puts you to sleep. Shadow lay down in the lee of a jagged rock, his eyes glazing over as the white drifts began to bury his gray fur. He was preparing to become part of the mountain. Chapter 5. The Unthinkable Return. Through the roar of the wind, a new sound emerged, a heavy, rhythmic thudding that vibrated to the frozen earth. Then a long, mournful howl that cut through the gale like a siren. Out of the whiteout, a massive shape materialized. It was a grizzly, a titan of the heights, his fur clotted with ice. Beside him, a mountain wolf, scarred and regal, moved like smoke. They didn't hesitate. They didn't see a dog. They saw the ghost of their salvation. The bear moved to the windward side of Shadow, using his massive body as a living leeward wall to block the killing frost. He began to huff, blowing his hot, humid breath directly onto Shadow's frozen face. The wolf lay directly on top of the husky, weaving his warmth into Shadow's coat, just as Shadow had done for him in the Spruce Hollow years ago. For 12 hours, they stayed. They didn't hunt. They didn't leave. When the sun finally broke through the clouds the following morning, a group of local rangers trekking the pass found something that defied every law of biology. They found a grizzly and a wolf standing guard over an old husky. As the humans approached, the two predators didn't attack. They looked at the dog, then at each other, and faded back into the trees. Shadow stood up, shaky but alive, watching his boys disappear one last time. They hadn't just returned the favor. They had proven that in the heart of the wild, mercy is the strongest instinct of all.